When Maria Johnson walks into her own bank dressed in casual clothes, she's about to face something no CEO should experience: discrimination and humiliation at the hands of her own employees. What happens next will change not just one bank, but the entire banking industry forever. They don't recognize her. They question her. They doubt her. They have no idea who they're really talking to, or what she's capable of. What begins as a simple withdrawal turns into a moment that will test Maria's character, challenge her leadership, and ultimately reveal a truth that nobody sees coming. Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't anger or revenge. It's something far more unexpected. Maria Johnson woke up at 5:01 a.m. just like she did every morning. The sun wasn't even up yet, but Maria was. She had a bank to run. As she made her coffee, Maria looked at the small picture hanging on her fridge. It showed a tiny house with peeling paint and a young girl selling lemonade out front. That little girl was Maria, age 8, and that lemonade stand was her very first business. Maria smiled at the memory. Her mom had helped her make the lemonade, and her dad had helped her make the stand from old wooden boxes. They didn't have much money back then, but they had taught Maria something more important than money. They taught her to work hard and dream big. "A Johnson never quits," her dad would say when things got tough. Maria's parents worked harder than anyone she knew. Her mom, Elaine, cleaned houses for rich families across town. Her dad, Marcus, fixed cars at the local garage. They left early and came home late, their hands rough from years of hard work. Maria, her mom had told her once, "People might judge you by how you look or where you come from, but they can never take away what's in your brain and your heart." Those words stuck with Maria through all the hard times. When Maria was 12, she started a lawn mowing business. She saved every dollar she earned. By the time she finished middle school, she had enough money to buy her own lawnmower instead of using the old one her neighbors had lent her. In high school, Maria got a job as a bank teller after school. She was the youngest person working there, but she learned fast. Maria watched how money moved through the bank. She noticed how some people were treated better than others. She promised herself that if she ever ran a bank, things would be different. "You have a good head for numbers," her boss at the bank told her. "You should study business in college." Maria did just that. She applied for every scholarship she could find. When the acceptance letter came from State University with a full scholarship, her parents cried happy tears. College wasn't easy. Maria worked 2 jobs while taking full classes. Sometimes she was so tired she fell asleep over her textbooks. But she never quit. "A Johnson never quits," she would remind herself in her dad's voice. Maria graduated at the top of her class with a degree in finance. The big banks in the city all wanted to hire her. She picked Westside Financial because they promised she could work with community programs. For 10 years, Maria worked her way up at Westside Financial. She started as a loan officer, then became a branch manager, and finally, a regional director. All along the way, she helped people who reminded her of her parents, hard-working folks who just needed a fair chance. Then came the biggest challenge of her career. Riverside Bank, a small local bank, was failing. The board of directors was looking for someone to turn things around. They needed someone who understood both banking and people. "I can make Riverside Bank work," Maria told them during her interview, "but I'll do it my way. We'll help the community, not just the rich customers." The board took a chance on Maria. At age 40, she became the CEO of Riverside Bank, the first Black woman to lead a bank in the city. The first year was hard. Maria worked 18-hour days. She visited every branch and learned every employee's name. She went to community meetings at night to hear what people needed. A bank should serve everyone, she told her team. Not just those who already have money. Maria created special loan programs for small business owners in poor neighborhoods. She hired financial teachers to help people learn about saving money. She made sure her bank workers treated everyone with respect, no matter how they dressed or how much money they had. Slowly but surely, Riverside Bank started to grow. People who had never trusted banks before opened accounts. Small businesses that couldn't get loans anywhere else came to Riverside. The bank that everyone thought would fail was now the fastest-growing bank in the state. 5 years after becoming CEO, Maria won the city's Business Leader of the Year award. At the ceremony, she brought her parents, now retired. As Maria gave her speech, she saw her mom and dad in the audience, their eyes shining with tears. Success isn't just about making money, Maria said in her speech. It's about lifting others as you climb. My parents taught me that. That night, as Maria drove her parents home, her dad squeezed her hand. "You did it, Maria," he said. "You really did it." But Maria just smiled. "We're just getting started, Dad. There's so much more to do." What no one knew was that Maria had a big plan for the next day. She was going to withdraw $50,000 in cash to surprise the community center where she had learned to use a computer as a child. The center needed a new roof and new computers. Maria wanted to help, just like the center had helped her all those years ago. As she went to bed that night, Maria set her alarm for 5:00 a.m. Tomorrow would be a special day. She had no idea that it would also be the day that would change everything. For her bank, and for the entire banking industry. Maria fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of the surprise she would deliver tomorrow. Did she know? The surprise would end up being on her. Maria's alarm rang at 5:00 a.m. sharp. She jumped out of bed feeling excited. Today was the day she would help the Hope Community Center, the same place where she had first touched a computer. As a little girl, was going to get a big surprise. After a quick shower, Maria stood in front of her closet. Usually, she wore fancy business suits to work. As the CEO of Riverside Bank, she had to look the part. But today was different. Today, she wanted to be low-key. No one at the community center should guess she was coming with a big donation until the last minute. "Perfect," Maria said, as she picked out a simple pair of blue jeans and a plain white blouse. She pulled her hair back into a ponytail instead of her usual neat bun. Looking in the mirror, Maria hardly recognized herself. She looked like a regular person, not the boss of a big bank. At breakfast, Maria checked her bank account on her phone. The $50,000 was ready to withdraw. She had already filled out the paperwork last week, so the main branch would have the cash ready. All she had to do was show up, show her ID, and collect it. "This is going to make such a difference," Maria said to herself, thinking about the leaky roof at the community center and the 10-year-old computers that barely worked. Maria grabbed her purse and headed out. Instead of taking her usual BMW, she decided to drive her old Honda today. It was all part of staying under the radar. The surprise would be so much better that way. Traffic was heavy, and Maria tapped her fingers on the steering wheel as she waited. Her mind wandered to how much the community center had changed her life. When she was 11, her parents couldn't afford a computer. But the center had 5 computers that any kid could use for free. Maria had spent hours there, learning how to type, how to use spreadsheets, and how to research online. "Ms. Thompson," Maria whispered, remembering the kind older woman who had taught computer classes at the center. "I wish you could see me now." Ms. Thompson had passed away years ago, but she was one of the reasons Maria had succeeded. The new computer lab would be named after her. Finally, Maria arrived at the main branch of Riverside Bank. She parked her car and walked toward the large glass building with Riverside Bank written in big gold letters across the front. Maria felt a little funny walking into her own bank dressed so casually, but she reminded herself it was for a good cause. The bank was busy this morning. At least 20 customers waited in line, and all the teller windows were open. Maria looked around, noticing several workers she didn't recognize. That wasn't surprising anymore. The bank had grown from 50 employees when she started to over 500 now. Maria couldn't possibly know everyone by name like she used to. Instead of going to her private elevator or using the special customer service desk for VIPs, Maria got in the regular line. She wanted to experience her bank the way normal customers did. Was the service as good as she hoped? Were people treated with respect? This was a chance to find out. The line moved slowly. Maria watched the tellers at work. Most were friendly and efficient, just as she had trained them to be. But one young man seemed a bit impatient with an elderly customer who was confused about a deposit slip. Maria made a mental note to speak with the customer service manager about that later. After 20 minutes, Maria reached the front of the line. She was directed to window 3, where a young man with blonde hair and a name tag that read Brad greeted her with a quick, "Next customer, please." Brad looked tired, like he'd rather be anywhere else than at work on a Monday morning. He didn't make eye contact as Maria stepped up to his window. "Good morning," Maria said with a warm smile. "How are you today?" Brad looked up, a bit surprised by her friendly tone. "I'm fine, thank you. How can I help you?" "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please," Maria said, still smiling. "Sure. How much would you like to withdraw?" Brad asked, his fingers ready on the keyboard. $50,000, Maria replied quietly, trying not to let other customers hear. Brad's fingers froze. He looked up at Maria, his eyes suddenly sharp and suspicious. He looked her up and down, taking in her casual clothes and simple ponytail. "Excuse me? Did you say $50,000? Brad asked, his voice louder than necessary. Maria nodded. "Yes, that's correct. I've already arranged it. The cash should be ready." Brad's eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am, that's a very large withdrawal. I'll need to see several forms of ID, and I'll have to get my manager's approval." "Of course," Maria said, understanding the security protocols. After all, she had created many of them herself. She reached into her purse and pulled out her driver's license and bank card. "Here you go. And I'm actually..." Before she could finish her sentence and explain who she was, Brad grabbed her ID and walked away from the window without another word. Maria stood there, feeling a bit awkward as people in line behind her started to whisper. "What's taking so long?" someone muttered. "Some people think they can just walk in and take out thousands," another person said. Maria felt her cheeks getting warm. This wasn't how she had planned to start her day. She watched as Brad spoke to a woman in a navy blue suit across the room. The woman kept looking over at Maria with a frown on her face. As they walked back toward the window, Maria could tell this wasn't going to be as simple as she had hoped. The woman in the navy suit had a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read, Patricia Wells, Branch Manager. Maria had never met Ms. Wells before. She must be new. In fact, Maria realized she didn't recognize several of the managers on the floor today. The bank had grown so fast, with new branches opening every few months, that they had hired many new managers recently. "This is going to be interesting," Maria thought to herself as the manager approached. Little did she know just how interesting things were about to get. Brad returned with the manager, Ms. Patty Wells. She was tall with short red hair and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maria could tell right away that Ms. Wells was the type of manager who followed every rule to the letter. "Good morning," Ms. Wells said, her voice crisp and professional. "I understand you're requesting a rather large cash withdrawal today." "Yes, that's correct," Maria replied. She kept her voice calm and friendly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you a few questions," Ms. Wells said. She didn't lower her voice so everyone nearby could hear their conversation. "Withdrawals of this size are unusual and require extra verification." Maria nodded. "I understand." "Completely." Ms. Wells looked down at Maria's ID, then back up at Maria, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This account shows a lot of activity. Very large amounts moving in and out regularly." "Yes, it's a very active account," Maria agreed. "And may I ask what this cash is for?" Ms. Wells pressed. $50,000 is a significant amount to take in cash. Most people would use a cashier's check or a wire transfer. Maria felt uncomfortable as she noticed people in line were watching now, curious about what was happening. This wasn't how she had planned things. She had wanted to be discreet. "It's for a donation," Maria explained quietly. "But I'd rather not discuss the details here in the lobby. Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private?" Ms. Wells didn't move. Instead, she looked Maria up and down, taking in her casual jeans and simple blouse. Maria saw something in the manager's eyes that made her stomach tighten. It was a look she had seen before, many times in her life. Judgment. "A donation," Ms. Wells repeated, her tone making it clear she didn't believe Maria. "And you need it in cash? Today? Right now?" "Yes," Maria said, feeling her cheeks grow warm. "I've already arranged for this withdrawal. The cash should be ready." Ms. Wells tapped Maria's ID against the counter. "Your banking history shows you've never withdrawn this much cash before. Usually, your large transactions are electronic." "That's true," Maria admitted. "This is a special circumstance." By now, the line behind Maria had grown longer. People were getting impatient, shifting their weight from foot to foot, checking their watches. Maria could hear whispers. "What's taking so long? Some people think they can just walk in and take out thousands. Who does she think she is?" Ms. Wells looked at the growing line, then back at Maria. Her expression hardened. "I'm sorry, but without more information about why you need this much cash, I don't feel comfortable approving such a large withdrawal for someone like you." Tidru, words hung in the air between them. "Someone like you." Maria felt like she had been slapped. 3 simple words, but they carried so much weight. 3 words that brought back every time she had been judged, every door that had been closed, every opportunity denied because of how she looked. "Someone like me," Maria repeated quietly. She wanted to be sure she had heard correctly. Ms. Wells shifted uncomfortably, realizing what she had implied. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "You know what I mean," Ms. Wells said, lowering her voice slightly. "This is a lot of money, and we need to be careful. Bank policy requires extra verification for unusual transactions. Your appearance today doesn't match your usual banking pattern, and a cash withdrawal of this size raises certain concerns." Maria felt her hands trembling slightly. She placed them flat on the counter to steady them. 20 years of banking experience told her what was happening. If she were white, or if she were dressed in an expensive suit, this conversation would be very different. "My appearance?" Maria asked. "Phew." Wells flushed slightly. "Your casual attire is notable for someone making such a large withdrawal. And, frankly, Your account activity is unusual enough that we need to be absolutely certain that you are who you say you are, and that this transaction is legitimate." By now, everyone in the lobby was watching. The other tellers had slowed their work, stealing glances at the scene unfolding at window 3. Maria felt small and exposed, standing there while everyone stared. "I can assure you," Maria said, her voice now shaking slightly, "that I am exactly who my ID says I am, and this is a legitimate withdrawal from my account." "Perhaps," Ms. Wells said, "but I'll still need more information. What exactly is this? Donation for? Which organization? Why cash instead of a check? And why are you in such a hurry today?" Each question felt like an accusation. Maria had been banking at Riverside for years before she even became CEO. Her accounts were in perfect order. She had millions in deposits. Yet, here she was, being treated like a potential criminal trying to pull a fast one. An older man behind Maria in line sighed loudly. "Can we get another teller over here? Some of us have real banking to do." The comment stung. Real banking. As if her transaction wasn't legitimate. As if she didn't belong here. Maria took a deep breath. She had two choices. She could cause a scene, or she could handle this with the grace and professionalism that had gotten her where she was today. "May I please speak with you in private?" Maria asked Ms. Wells, keeping her voice steady despite the anger and humiliation burning in her chest. Mrs. Wells hesitated, looking at the line of customers, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. Brad, please direct your line to window 4. Ms. Johnson and I will speak in my office." Brad called the next customer while Ms. Wells led Maria to a small glass-walled office to the side of the lobby. Maria could feel eyes following her as she walked. She held her head high, even as shame burned through her. This was her bank. She had built it from almost nothing. Yet here she was, being led aside like someone who had done something wrong. As Ms. Wells closed the office door, behind them, Maria took another deep breath. She had dealt with prejudice before. She had overcome it before. But never had she expected to face it here, in the very institution she led. "Now," Ms. Wells said, sitting down behind her desk, "let's discuss this unusual withdrawal request of yours." Maria looked at her for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. "Ms. Wells," Maria began, her voice calm despite the storm inside her, "I understand you're doing your job. Protecting the bank is important." Ms. Wells nodded, looking slightly relieved that Maria seemed to understand. "Exactly. We have procedures for a reason." "I agree completely," Maria said. "Security is essential. In banking. But there's something you should know." Maria reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather case. She hadn't planned to use it today. In fact, she rarely carried it at all. But this morning, something had told her to bring it. She opened the case and placed it on the desk, turning it so Ms. Wells could see what was inside. It was her executive ID badge with the gold seal of Riverside Bank. Next to her photo were the words, "Maria Johnson, Chief Executive Officer." Ms. Wells stared at the badge, her face drained of color. I don't understand." "I think you do," Maria said gently. "We haven't met before, but I'm Maria Johnson." Ms. Wells shook her head in confusion. "I know that from your ID, but—" "No," Maria said. "I'm Maria Johnson, the CEO of Riverside Bank." The words hung in the air between them. Ms. Wells's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the badge to Maria and back again, as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. That's not possible," Ms. Wells finally stammered. "The CEO wouldn't be dressed like, wouldn't be standing in line to, wouldn't be black?" Maria asked quietly. Ms. Wells flinched. "No, that's not what I meant. The CEO would use the executive entrance. She would have an assistant make withdrawals. She wouldn't come to the main lobby dressed in casual clothes." "Most days, you'd be right," Maria agreed. "But today, I wanted to make an anonymous donation. I didn't want anyone to know it was coming from me. That's why I dressed down and came through the front door." Ms. Wells's face had turned from pale to bright red. She looked like she might be sick. "Ms. Johnson, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I believe you," Maria said, putting her badge away. "You didn't know who I was. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" "I don't understand," Ms. Wells said, her voice small. "If you had known I was the CEO, you would have treated me differently," Maria explained. "You would have been respectful. You would have processed my withdrawal without question. You would never have said, 'someone like you,' in that tone." Busy. Wells looked down at her hands. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Maybe not consciously," Maria said. "But the words came from somewhere, and they hurt." "I'm truly sorry," Ms. Wells whispered. "I'll process your withdrawal right away." She started to stand, but Maria raised a hand to stop her. "Before we do that, I'd like to talk about what just happened." Ms. Wells slowly sat back down, looking miserable. "I'm not angry at you personally," Maria continued. "What happened today happens to people like me all the time. The difference is, most people don't have the power to do anything about it." Ms. Wells looked up, confused. Are you going to fire me?" It was a fair question. As CEO, Maria could certainly fire Ms. Wells on the spot. Many people would expect her to do exactly that, but Maria had something else in mind. "No," Maria said. "I'm not going to fire you." Relief washed over Ms. Wells's face. "At least, not yet," Maria added. "What happens next depends on you." "I'll do anything," Ms. Wells said quickly. "I never meant to offend you or anyone else. I was just following security protocols." "Were you?" Maria asked. "Or were you applying those protocols differently because of how I looked?" Ms. Wells started to object, then stopped. She thought for a moment. I don't know. Maybe I was." Maria appreciated the honesty. It was a good start. "Let me ask you something," Maria said. "If a white man in an expensive suit had come in asking for $50,000, would you have questioned him the same way?" Ms. Wells didn't answer right away. She seemed to be thinking hard about the question. Finally, she shook her head. "Probably not," she admitted. "And that's wrong. I see that now." Maria nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook and pen. "I believe people can learn and change. I believe in second chances. But I also believe in accountability." She wrote something in the notebook and turned it so Ms. Wells could see. It was a list with a single item. 1. Training program for all employees about fair treatment of customers. "Here's what we're going to do," Maria said. "Today is going to change how our bank works forever. And you're going to help me make that happen." Ms. Wells looked at the notebook, then back at Maria. "Me? But I'm the one who messed up." "Exactly," Maria said. "And who better to help fix the problem than someone who understands it from the inside?" As they talked, Maria kept adding items to her list. Every few minutes, she paused to check Ms. Wells's reaction. The branch manager had gone from terrified to embarrassed to, finally, thoughtful. She was actually making suggestions now. ideas for how to make the bank better. "Why are you doing this?" Ms. Wells asked after they had been talking for almost an hour. "Most people in your position would have fired me on the spot." Maria thought about her parents and the lessons they had taught her. She thought about all the times in her life when she had been judged, dismissed, or underestimated. "Because firing you wouldn't solve the real problem," Maria said. "The problem isn't one person. It's a system that teaches people to make assumptions based on how someone looks. And I want to change that system, starting right here at Riverside Bank." Ms. Wells nodded slowly. "I want to help." "Good," Maria said, standing up, "because we have a lot of work to do." As they left the office together, Maria realized she would have to postpone her donation to the community center. But maybe that was for the best. What she was about to do would help far more people in the long run. The humiliation she had felt standing at that teller window had been painful, but Maria Johnson had never been one to waste a good crisis. This painful moment was about to become the catalyst for something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. Maria and Ms. Wells walked back into the lobby together. The line of customers was still long, and everyone stared as they emerged from the office. They were probably expecting Ms. Wells to announce that security would be escorting Maria out. Instead, Maria walked straight to the center of the lobby and cleared her throat. "Excuse me, everyone," she said in a clear, strong voice. "I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Maria Johnson, CEO of Riverside Bank." The lobby went silent. One woman gasped. Brad, the teller, nearly dropped the stack of cash he was counting. An older man in the line muttered, "Well, I'll be." "I came in today as a regular customer," Maria continued. "I wanted to see how our bank treats people. What I experienced was troubling, but it's also a chance for all of us to learn and do better." Ms. Wells stood beside Maria, her face still red with embarrassment. But to her credit, she didn't run away or hide. She stayed right there, facing the consequences of what had happened. "Starting today," Maria announced, "Riverside Bank is launching a new initiative to make sure every single customer is treated with respect and fairness, no matter what they look like or what they're wearing." A few people in the lobby nodded. Others looked confused. "Ms. Wells here is going to help me lead this initiative," Maria added, placing a hand on the manager's shoulder. The gesture was meant to show that this wasn't about punishment. It was about learning and growing. "Now, I'd like to apologize to everyone for the delay," Maria finished. "Ms. Wells will make sure all of you are helped right away. Thank you for your patience." As Ms. Wells hurried to open another window to help the waiting customers, Maria took out her phone and called her assistant. "Janet, I need you to cancel my meetings for the day," she said, "and call the board members. We need an emergency meeting this afternoon." Within hours, the entire executive team of Riverside Bank was gathered in the main conference room. The wood table gleamed under the bright lights, and the city skyline sparkled through the windows. Maria stood at the head of the table, still wearing her jeans and white blouse. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Maria began. She looked around at the faces of her leadership team. Most were white men in expensive suits. Out of 12 executives, only 3 were women and only 2 were people of color. Maria made a mental note to address that issue too, but not today. Today was about something else. "I had an experience this morning that I want to share with you," Maria said. Then she told them everything that had happened at the branch. She didn't name Ms. Wells, but she described how she had been treated with suspicion and disrespect. "This could have been any of us making this mistake," Maria said after she finished the story. "We need better training and clear rules that protect all of our customers." The executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Some looked shocked. Others looked embarrassed. A few nodded in understanding. "Maria, "I'm truly sorry that happened to you," said Richard Barnes, the chief operating officer. "But is it really that big a deal? I mean, the manager was just being careful with a large withdrawal." Maria looked Richard in the eye. "Would she have been just being careful if I were a white man in a suit? Be honest." Richard opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He looked down at his hands. "That's what I thought," Maria said. "And it's not just about me. I can handle it. I'm the CEO. But what about all the other people who get treated that way and don't have the power to do anything about it?" Sarah Chen, the chief marketing officer, spoke up. "Maria's right. Banking is based on trust. If people don't feel trusted or respected when they come to us, they'll go somewhere else." "Exactly," Maria said. "This isn't just the right thing to do morally. It's also good business." For the next 2 hours, the team brainstormed ways to address the problem. Maria wrote everything on the whiteboard, just as she had started to do with Ms. Wells. By the end of the meeting, they had a plan. Create a training program about treating all customers with respect. Make withdrawal rules clear and apply them. The same way for everyone. Start a mystery shopper program to test how employees treated different customers. Change how employee bonuses worked to reward good customer service. "What about the branch manager?" asked Thomas Wilson, the chief legal officer. "Is there going to be any discipline?" Maria shook her head. "No, Ms. Wells made a mistake, but she owned up to it. In fact, I've asked her to help lead the new training program." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Is that wise, using someone who showed this kind of bias?" "Who better to explain the problem than someone who has made the mistake herself?" Maria said. "Ms. Wells has already given me some excellent ideas. She understands now, and she wants to be part of the solution." As the meeting wrapped up, Maria felt tired but hopeful. What had started as a horrible day was turning into something important. "I want this to be our top priority for the next month," Maria told her team as they gathered their things. "We're going to make Riverside Bank a place where everyone feels welcome and respected." After everyone left, Maria stayed in the conference room alone. She thought about all the people who had probably been treated the way she had been treated today. People who weren't bank CEOs. People who couldn't stand up for themselves the way she could. She thought about her parents, who had taught her to stand tall even when people tried to make her feel small. She thought about Ms. Thompson from the community center, who had believed in her when others didn't. Maria picked up her phone and called the director of the Hope Community Center. "I'm going to have to postpone that surprise we talked about," Maria said. "Something important has come up. But don't worry, the donation is still coming. In fact, I think it might be even bigger than we originally planned." As she hung up the phone, Maria smiled. Yes, today had been humiliating. Yes, it had hurt. But maybe, just maybe, it had happened for a reason. Sometimes the most painful moments led to the most important changes. Maria Johnson had always been good at turning problems into opportunities. And this problem was about to become the biggest opportunity of all. The next morning, Maria arrived at work wearing her usual CEO outfit, a crisp navy blue suit and her hair in a neat bun. But something was different today. There was a new energy in her step, a new fire in her eyes. She walked straight to her office and called Ms. Wells. "Good morning, Ms. Wells," Maria said when the branch manager answered. "How are you feeling today?" "Honestly, still pretty embarrassed," Ms. Wells admitted. "But also determined. I didn't sleep much last night. I kept thinking about everything we talked about." "Me too," Maria said. "That's why I'm calling. I'd like you to come to the main office today. Can you get someone to cover for you at the branch?" 2 hours later, Ms. Wells sat across from Maria in the CEO's spacious office. The branch manager looked nervous in her simple black pants and blue blouse. She had probably never been to the executive floor before. "Thank you for coming," Maria said. "I've been working on our plan, and I want your input." Ms. Wells looked surprised. "You really want my opinion? Even after what happened?" "Especially after what happened," Maria replied. "You've seen the problem from the inside. Now, I need your help to fix it." For the next 3 hours, Maria and Ms. Wells worked on the training program. They created scenarios based on real experiences, including what had happened to Maria. They designed exercises to help employees recognize their own hidden biases. They wrote clear guidelines for handling large transactions that would be the same for everyone, regardless of how they looked or dressed. "This is good," Maria said as they reviewed their work. "But we need to test it. We need to make sure it actually works in the real world." "How do we do that?" Ms. Wells asked. Maria smiled. "We send people into our branches to see how they're treated. Different types of people asking for the same services." "Like secret shoppers?" Ms. Wells asked. "Exactly like that," Maria replied. "We'll hire people of different races, ages, and backgrounds. We'll dress them in different types of clothes, some fancy, some casual. Then we'll have them all request the same banking services and report back on how they were treated." By the end of the day, the plan was taking shape. Maria called her executive team back together to present it. "I'm impressed," said Sarah Chen, the chief marketing officer. "This is thorough, but it's going to be expensive to implement." "It's worth every penny," Maria replied. "Trust is our most valuable asset. We can't afford to lose it." "I agree with Maria," Richard Barnes chimed in. Yesterday he had questioned whether the problem was a big deal. Today he seemed to understand better. "But I have a suggestion. What if we make this part of our brand? What if we tell our customers what we're doing?" Maria considered this. "You mean make it a selling point? Come to Riverside Bank, where everyone is treated with respect?" Richard nodded. "Exactly. We turned this challenge into an opportunity." Maria smiled. That was exactly what she had been thinking. "I like it," she said. "Let's work it into our next marketing campaign." For the next 2 weeks, Maria worked harder than she ever had before. She personally reviewed every part of the new training program. She met with branch managers from across the city to explain the changes. She even role-played different scenarios with staff, pretending to be a customer so they could practice their responses. Ms. Wells worked just as hard. She shared her story with other managers, admitting her mistake and explaining what she had learned. At first it was humiliating to talk about it, but soon she realized that her honesty was helping others avoid making the same mistake. "The funny thing is," Ms. Wells told Maria one afternoon, "I never thought of myself as someone who would judge people based on how they look. I always thought I was fair." "Most of us think that way," Maria said. "That's what makes bias so tricky. A lot of the time, we don't even know we're doing it." "How did you learn to handle it so well?" Ms. Wells asked. "If someone had treated me the way I treated you, I would have been furious." Maria was quiet for a moment. "I've had a lot of practice," she finally said. "When you deal with this kind of thing your whole life, you learn to choose your battles." "Well, I'm glad you chose this battle," Ms. Wells said. "It's changing how I see the world." 2 weeks after the incident, the new training program was ready to launch. Maria gathered all the employees from the main branch in the large conference room. Over 100 people filled the chairs, from tellers to loan officers to security guards. "Thank you all for being here," Maria began. Today we're starting something important. We're going to talk about how we treat our customers, all of our customers. She told them the story of what had happened to her, without naming Ms. Wells or Brad. This isn't about blaming anyone, Maria explained. We all have biases. The important thing is to recognize them and work to overcome them. Then Maria introduced Ms. Wells, who would be leading the first training session. The branch manager looked nervous as she stepped to the front of the room. 2 weeks ago, I made a terrible mistake, Ms. Wells began. I judged someone based on how they looked, not on who they really were. That person turned out to be our CEO, Ms. Johnson. A murmur went through the room. Many employees looked shocked. I'm not telling you this to embarrass myself, Ms. Wells continued. I'm telling you because I learned something important that day, and I want to help all of you learn it too, without having to make the same mistake I did. As Maria watched Ms. Wells lead the training, she felt proud, not just of herself for turning a painful experience into something positive, but of Ms. Wells for having the courage to learn and grow. The training program was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Maria's plan would transform not just Riverside Bank, but banking practices across the city. Her simple trip to withdraw money had sparked something much bigger than she could have imagined. And the best part? Maria hadn't forgotten about the Hope Community Center. Her original plan to donate $50,000 for a new roof and computers was still in the works. But now she had something even bigger in mind. 3 months had passed since the day Maria was denied her withdrawal. Spring had turned to summer, and the training program was in full swing. Every employee at Riverside Bank had gone through the new training, from the newest teller to the oldest board member. Maria sat in her office reviewing the latest reports. The numbers looked good. Customer satisfaction scores were up. More new accounts were being opened than ever before. People seemed to appreciate a bank that made treating everyone fairly a top priority. But Maria wanted to be sure the changes were real, not just on paper. Were people really being treated better? Or were employees just saying the right things because the boss was watching? Time for a real test, Maria said to herself. She picked up her phone and called Sarah Chen, her chief marketing officer. Sarah, remember when we talked about mystery shoppers? I think it's time to try it. Sarah was excited about the idea. I've already started researching companies that provide this service, but I had a thought. What if we don't just hire one company? What if we get people from community groups to help us too? I love that, Maria said. People who actually live in the neighborhoods we serve. Over the next week, Maria and Sarah assembled a diverse team of 20 mystery shoppers. They included people of all ages, races, and backgrounds. Some wore expensive clothes, others dressed very casually. Each person was given a specific banking task to complete: opening an account, asking about a loan, or making a withdrawal. Maria explained the plan to her mystery shoppers in a private meeting room downtown, away from any bank branches. Your job is simple, she told them. Go into our branches and request the service you've been assigned. Then report back on how you were treated. Were you greeted with respect? Did the employee make eye contact? Did they answer all your questions? Did they make you feel welcome? An older black man raised his hand. What if we're not treated well? That's important information, Maria said honestly. We need to know if the training isn't working. A young woman in a hijab spoke up. I've had negative experiences at banks before. Is it okay if I bring someone with me? Absolutely, Maria assured her. Do whatever makes you comfortable. The whole point is to get an honest picture of how people are treated. For 2 weeks, the mystery shoppers visited Riverside Bank branches across the city. Some went to the same branch multiple times, dressed differently each time. Others visited several different branches. When all the reports came in, Maria and her team spent days analyzing the results. The news was better than before, but not perfect. Some branches showed clear improvement. Others still had problems, especially with certain types of customers. Maria wasn't angry. Change takes time. She used the test results to make the training even better. The branches that did well received special recognition. Those that still had problems got extra help. "We're not looking to punish people," Maria reminded her team. "We're looking to help them improve." One day, about 3 months after the incident, Maria decided to test the main branch again herself. This wasn't an official mystery shopper visit, it was personal. She wanted to see if the place where she had been humiliated had really changed Maria. Dressed simply, jeans and a t-shirt with sneakers. She pulled her hair back in a ponytail and wore no makeup. She even left her fancy watch at home. When she entered the bank, she immediately noticed a different feeling in the air. The tellers seemed more engaged with customers. People were smiling more. There was a new sign near the entrance that read, "At Riverside Bank, we respect every customer. That's our promise." Maria got in line and waited her turn. When she reached the front, she found herself at Brad's window, the same teller who had been suspicious of her large withdrawal request months ago. Brad looked up and smiled. "Good morning. Welcome to Riverside Bank. How can I help you today?" He didn't recognize her. Maria wasn't surprised. They had only met briefly that one time, and she looked quite different now than she had then. "I'd like to open a new account," Maria said. "Just a basic checking account with a small deposit to start." "I'd be happy to help you with that," Brad said warmly. "How much were you planning to deposit today?" "Just $100, Maria said. 3 months ago, she suspected that such a small amount might have gotten her less enthusiastic service. But today, Brad treated her request with the same care he might give someone depositing $10,000. "That's a great start," he said, with what seemed like genuine encouragement. "Our basic checking account has no minimum balance requirement and no monthly fee if you use direct deposit." Brad explained all the account features clearly. He made eye contact. He answered all of Maria's questions patiently. Not once did he make her feel less important because of her casual clothes or small deposit. When the account was set up, Brad handed Maria her new bank card. "Thank you for choosing Riverside Bank," he said. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, thank you," Maria replied. "You've been very helpful." As Maria left the bank, she felt a sense of pride. The change was real. Not perfect. Yet, the mystery shopper reports had shown that. But real progress was happening. Back in her office, Maria sent an email to Ms. Wells, who had been promoted to lead the training program full-time. "I just had a very positive experience." At the main branch, Maria wrote, "The same teller who once looked at me with suspicion treated me with complete respect today, even though I was only opening a small account. Your training is working, Patty. We're making a difference." Ms. Wells, Patty, as Maria now called her, replied within minutes. "That means so much to hear. We still have work to do, but we're on the right track. Thank you for giving me this chance to be part of something important." Maria smiled as she read the message. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out the folder labeled Hope Community Center Project. It was time to move forward with the next phase of her plan. News travels fast in a city. Within weeks, word had spread about what Riverside Bank was doing. Other banks started to notice that something was different. Riverside was getting new customers, lots of them. People who had never trusted banks before were opening accounts at Riverside. Small business owners who had been turned down for loans elsewhere were getting approved. The bank was growing, faster than ever. Maria wasn't surprised when she received a call from the president of the City Chamber of Commerce. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "our members have been talking about your bank's new approach. Would you be willing to speak at our next monthly meeting?" Maria agreed immediately. This was a chance to spread her message to other business leaders. On the day of the meeting, the Chamber's conference room was packed. Representatives from every major business in the city were there, including the presidents of all the other banks. Maria noticed how they watched her with curious eyes as she took her place at the podium. "Thank you all for inviting me today," Maria began. "I want to talk about something that should be simple, but often isn't: treating all customers with respect and fairness." For the next 20 minutes, Maria shared her story. She didn't mention Ms. Wells by name, but she described what had happened that day at the bank. "I could have walked away angry," Maria said. "I could have fired people. Instead, we decided to use that moment to make our bank better for everyone." Maria explained the training program and the mystery shopper tests. She showed charts of how customer satisfaction had increased. She shared stories from people who had opened accounts at Riverside after bad experiences at other banks. "Banking should be fair for everyone," she told the room full of business leaders. "When we treat people with respect, regardless of how they look or how much money they have, everyone wins. The customers win, the employees win, and yes, the business wins too." Some of the other bank presidents in the room looked uncomfortable. Maria could almost see them thinking about their own policies and practices. Others were taking notes, clearly interested in what she was saying. "You don't need to have my experience to make these changes," Maria concluded. "You just need to believe that everyone deserves respect. The rest will follow." When Maria finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Several business owners came up afterward to ask more questions. They wanted to know how they could apply similar ideas to their own companies. The local newspaper sent a reporter to cover Maria's speech. The next day, there was a front-page article with the headline, "Riverside Bank CEO Turns Personal Humiliation into Banking Revolution." The story went viral online. Soon, reporters from bigger newspapers and TV stations were calling Maria's office. Everyone wanted to hear about the bank that was changing how business treated people. More customers flocked to Riverside Bank. Other banks in town started creating their own training programs about fair treatment. Some even called Maria to ask for advice. "They're copying us," Sarah Chen said during a leadership meeting. "Should we be worried about that?" Maria shook her head. "Not at all. That's exactly what we want. If every bank in the city treats people fairly, everyone benefits. This was never just about making our bank better. It was about making banking better for everyone." 6 months after the incident, Maria finally made her donation to the Hope Community Center, but instead of the original $50,000, she brought a check for $250,000. "This isn't just from me," Maria explained to Mr. Washington, the center's director. "The board and I decided to make this an official bank initiative. Half is for your new roof and computers, as we discussed. The other half is to start a financial education program for kids and adults in the community." Mr. Washington was speechless. He had expected a generous donation, but nothing like this. "Ms. Johnson, this is incredible," he finally managed to say. "This will change everything for us." "Call me Maria," she said with a smile, "and this is just the beginning." The next day, workers arrived to start fixing the center's leaky roof. A truck delivered 30 new computers for the lab. Signs went up announcing the new Riverside Bank Financial Literacy Program that would begin the following month. "Ms. Thompson, The kind woman who had taught Maria to use computers all those years ago was gone. But Maria made sure her name lived on. A plaque on the door of the new computer lab read, "The Dorothy Thompson Technology Center, where dreams begin." When the center reopened with its new roof and shiny computer lab, Maria was there to cut the ribbon. Dozens of children and their parents gathered to see the improvements. "This center changed my life when I was a little girl," Maria told the Iowa crowd. "It gave me skills and confidence I couldn't get anywhere else. Now I wanted to do the same for a new generation." One little girl, about 8 years old, raised her hand. "Miss Johnson, is it true that you own the bank?" Maria smiled. "I'm the CEO, which means I run the bank, but I don't own it all by myself." "I want to run a bank someday, too," the little girl announced. "What's your name?" Maria asked. "Destiny," the girl replied proudly. "Well, Destiny," Maria said, kneeling down to look the child in the eyes, "I believe you can do anything you set your mind to. And when you're ready for your first job in banking, you come see me." As Maria watched the children explore the new computer lab, she thought about how far she had come from that little girl selling lemonade. She thought about all the obstacles she had faced, all the times she had been underestimated or dismissed. Sometimes the most painful moments led to the most important changes. That humiliating day at the bank had started something bigger than Maria could have imagined. And it wasn't over yet. There was still one more chapter to write in this story. One more surprise that nobody saw coming. 1 year after the incident at the bank, Maria received an email that made her heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "National Banking Excellence Award Winner Notification." Maria read the email 3 times to make sure it was real. Riverside Bank had been selected for the most prestigious banking award in the country. The award recognized banks that combined strong financial performance with exceptional service and community impact. "We did it," Maria whispered to herself. She forwarded the email to her leadership team with a simple message. "This belongs to all of us." The award ceremony would be held in New York City, in a grand ballroom with banking executives from across the country. Maria was asked to give a speech about Riverside Bank's success. As her plane landed in New York, Maria thought about what she would say. This was her chance to share Riverside's story with the entire banking industry. But there was one part of the story she had never told publicly. The real reason she had been at the bank that day, trying to withdraw $50,000. The night before the ceremony, Maria couldn't sleep. She kept rewriting her speech in her head. Should she tell the whole truth? Was it time to reveal the final piece of the puzzle? By morning, she had made her decision. The ballroom was packed with hundreds of banking executives in expensive suits. Maria wore a deep purple dress that made her stand out in the sea of black and navy. As her name was called, she walked to the stage with confidence, the crystal award gleaming in her hands. "Thank you for this honor," she began, looking out at the crowd. "I want to tell you all a story about why our bank has been so successful this past year." Maria took a deep breath and shared the full story of what had happened that day at her own bank. She described the humiliation she felt, the decision not to fire anyone, and the changes they had implemented instead. "I could have been angry. I could have been vengeful. Instead, we used that moment to make our bank better for everyone," Maria explained. The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. Many looked uncomfortable, perhaps wondering if similar things happened at their own banks. "But there's one part of this story I haven't shared publicly until now," Maria continued. "The reason I was at the bank that day, trying to withdraw $50,000 in cash." Maria paused, looking out at the crowd. "The community center I was trying to donate to that day is the same center where I learned to use a computer as a little girl. That center changed my life and put me on the path to becoming a banker." Maria showed a picture of the Hope Community Center on the big screen behind her. Then she showed a photo of herself as a child, sitting at one of the old computers with Ms. Thompson standing beside her. "This is where it all began for me," Maria said. "A place where a little girl from a poor neighborhood could dream of something bigger." The audience was completely silent now. "But here's what you don't know," Maria continued. "That $50,000 donation was just the beginning. What happened that day at the bank inspired something much bigger." Maria clicked to the next slide, which showed a blueprint for a building. "The board and I have now created a $10 million fund to build similar centers in underserved communities across the country." The audience gasped. $10 million was a massive commitment for a bank of Riverside's size. "These won't just be community centers," Maria explained. "Each one will include something special. Mini bank branches where young people can learn about money, saving, and respect. Because banking isn't just about money, it's about dignity and trust." Maria showed renderings of the new centers, each with a small Riverside Bank branch inside. The branches were designed to be welcoming and educational, with areas where children could learn about savings accounts and adults could get financial advice. By this time next year, we'll have opened 5 of these centers. By the end of 5 years, we plan to have 50 across the country. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. Many had tears in their eyes. This was revolutionary. A bank investing, not just in wealthy neighborhoods where they could make the most profit, but in communities that needed them most. "We're calling it the Dignity Banking Initiative," Maria said. "And I'm inviting every bank represented in this room to join us. Imagine if we all committed to making banking more accessible, more respectful, and more helpful to everyone." As Maria returned to her seat, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Patty Wells. "Just heard your speech on the live stream. Thank you for not giving up on me. The branch you put me in charge of just won top customer service ratings this month." Maria smiled. Patty was now running the most successful branch in the Riverside network. The woman who had once treated Maria with suspicion was now a leader in fair and respectful banking practices. Another text came in, this one from Sarah Chen. "The phones are already ringing. 3 banks want to partner with us on the initiative." By the time Maria returned to her hotel room that night, the videos of her speech had gone viral. Dignity banking was trending on social media. People were sharing their own stories of being treated poorly at banks because of how they looked or how much money they had. The next morning, Maria was invited to appear on a national news program. The host asked her if she ever regretted what happened that day at the bank. "Regret is a complicated word," Maria answered. "I wouldn't wish that humiliation on anyone, but without that experience, we wouldn't be where we are today." Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalyst for the best changes. 6 months after the award ceremony, Maria stood at the grand opening of the first new community center in Detroit. Beside her was a young girl named Destiny, the same child who had said she wanted to run a bank someday. Destiny had been selected to cut the ribbon. "Are you nervous?" Maria asked her. Destiny shook her head. "No way. This is just the beginning for me. Someday, I'm going to have your job, Ms. Johnson." Maria laughed. "I believe you will, Destiny. And when that day comes, I hope the banking world will be ready for you." As Destiny cut the ribbon and the crowd cheered, Maria thought about her parents. They had taught her to turn obstacles into opportunities. They had shown her that a person's true character is revealed not when things are easy, but when they are hard. Being denied a withdrawal at her own bank had been humiliating. But that Humiliation had sparked a revolution, not just in banking practices, but in how businesses treated people everywhere. Sometimes being denied was the beginning of something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. Wow, what did you think of Maria's story? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story about dignity, respect, and turning obstacles into opportunities touched you, please hit that like button. Your support helps spread kindness and these important messages to more viewers. And don't forget to check out the video appearing on your screen right now for another inspiring story about powerful women changing their industries. Remember, sometimes the moments that challenge us the most become the catalyst for our greatest impact. Thanks for watching.